The youngest of 4 children, Johnny wasn't able to have much of a childhood.
He saw a kind of rage in his mother at the circumstances in which she found herself, which was to have, 4 kids, multiple marriages, certain instability in their lives.
Johnny Depp is known for his larger-than-life roles and captivating presence. But what happened at a local movie theater one afternoon revealed a softer, more playful side of the beloved actor.
The last film I'm going to talk to you about today is from one of the biggest series of films at the studio. And these are some of my all-time favorites, and in my opinion, they are unlike any other franchise out there in terms of adventure, comedy, drama, and their ability to transport viewers to another world.
When a mischievous toddler boldly reached into his popcorn bucket, the unexpected moment turned into something truly heartwarming. Johnny's reaction left everyone in the theater smiling and proved once again why he's adored by fans worldwide. It was a typical Sunday afternoon at a small-town theater where families gathered to enjoy the latest animated blockbuster. Among the crowd was Johnny Depp, who was in town filming a new project. Dressed casually in a hat and sunglasses, he had hoped to enjoy a quiet day out, blending in with the rest of the audience. Johnny purchased a large popcorn and a soda before slipping into the dimly lit theater, taking a seat toward the back to remain inconspicuous. The atmosphere buzzed with the sound of excited children and rustling snack bags as families settled into their seats. Sitting a few rows ahead was a young mother with her energetic 2-year-old daughter, Lily, who had no intention of sitting still. As the previews played, Lily became fascinated by the man behind her. His unique hat and casual, mysterious vibe caught her attention, and her curious gaze kept darting back to Johnny. But it wasn't long before something else caught her eye. Johnny's oversized tub of buttery, golden popcorn. As the lights dimmed and the movie began, Lily's curiosity turned into action. With the stealth of a toddler ninja, she wriggled out of her seat and made her way toward Johnny, much to her mother's dismay. "Lily, come back," her mom whispered urgently. But the determined little girl had her eyes on the prize. Johnny, engrossed in the movie, didn't notice as Lily reached up with tiny hands and boldly grabbed a handful of popcorn from his bucket. It wasn't until she plopped down right next to him, grinning ear to ear and munching on her stolen snack, that Johnny turned to see his unexpected visitor. For a moment, there was silence as Johnny processed the scene. The audience, those who had noticed, held their breath, wondering how the star would react. Would he be annoyed? Bemused? Instead, Johnny's face broke into a warm smile, and he leaned down to Lily's level. "Well, hello there," he said in his signature soft, raspy tone. "I see you're a popcorn connoisseur." Johnny didn't just let the moment pass. He turned it into an unforgettable interaction. He reached into his bucket, grabbed a handful of popcorn, and handed it to Lily. "Here," he said with a playful grin. "This one's on the house." Lily giggled, clearly delighted by her new friend. Her mother, meanwhile, was mortified and quickly approached, apologizing profusely. "I'm so sorry," she said, trying to scoop Lily up. But Johnny waved her off with a kind smile. "No need to apologize," he said. "She's got good taste. Who can resist movie theater popcorn?" Instead of being bothered, Johnny engaged Lily in a little game. "You know," he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially, "this popcorn is special. It's magic popcorn. It makes the movie even better. Want to share it with me?" Lily nodded enthusiastically, and for the rest of the film, the two shared the bucket, Johnny occasionally passing her a handful while she giggled at the animated antics on screen. By the time the credits rolled, Lily was completely smitten with her new friend. "Bye, popcorn man," she called out as Johnny stood to leave, prompting laughter from nearby audience members. Johnny turned back, tipped his hat, and said, "See you around, little lady." The story didn't end there. After the movie, Johnny approached the mother and Lily in the theater lobby. "I hope I didn't interrupt her popcorn adventure," he joked, before pulling out a small gift from his jacket pocket, a signed note with a drawing of a little girl holding a giant tub of popcorn. "For Lily," he said. "So she always remembers her first heist." The mother was nearly in tears as she thanked him. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her voice trembling. Johnny smiled gently. "Sometimes, Little moments are the big ones, he replied. She made my day more special than I could have imagined. The theater staff, who had witnessed the entire interaction, were equally touched. He didn't just brush it off or make it a joke, one employee later shared. He turned it into something magical for that little girl and her mom. That's the kind of person Johnny Depp is. In the days that followed, the story spread across social media as other theatergoers shared what they had witnessed. Johnny Depp didn't just let a kid steal his popcorn. He made her feel like the star of the show, one post read, garnering thousands of likes and comments. For Lily and her mom, the memory became a cherished story they would tell for years to come. The signed note found a permanent spot on their living room wall, a reminder of the unexpected kindness of a Hollywood star who treated them like old friends. Johnny, ever humble, brushed off the attention when asked about the incident in an interview. It wasn't a big deal, he said. She wanted popcorn, and I had popcorn. Sometimes, it's the simple things that bring the most joy. The cozy coffee shop buzzed with life on a rainy afternoon. The warm aroma of espresso and freshly baked pastries filled the air as people sat hunched over laptops, books, and quiet conversations. Outside, the rain poured steadily, streaking the large windows with droplets that distorted the bustling street beyond. At a small table near the corner sat Johnny Depp, dressed in a simple black jacket, sunglasses, and a wide-brimmed hat. He sipped his coffee quietly, a notebook and pen in front of him. Despite his attempt to blend in, there was an undeniable air about him that caught the occasional curious glance. But Johnny was used to this. He had mastered the art of quietly existing in public spaces, his presence unassuming yet magnetic. At another table, closer to the counter, sat a black woman in her early 30s. She wore a tailored blazer and carried herself with quiet confidence. Her laptop was open, papers spread across the table as she typed with purpose. Her name was Alicia, and she was preparing for an important work presentation, completely absorbed in her task. The peace of the cafe was broken when a sharply dressed white woman in her 50s approached the counter. Her demeanor was brisk, her voice sharp as she placed her order. "I'll have a triple shot latte, and make it quick," she said to the barista, barely glancing at the young man behind the counter. As she waited for her drink, the woman's eyes scanned the room, landing on Alicia. Her gaze lingered, her expression shifting to one of quiet disdain. She took her latte, muttered a thank you, and walked toward the seating area, her heels clicking against the floor. Passing by Alicia's table, the woman paused. Her voice cut through the air, loud enough to turn heads. "Excuse me, but you're taking up too much space." Alicia looked up, startled. "I'm sorry?" she asked, her tone polite but confused. The woman gestured at Alicia's papers spread across the table. "There are other people here, you know. You shouldn't hog the entire table." Alicia blinked, glancing at the empty seats nearby. "There are plenty of other tables," she said calmly. "I'm not bothering anyone." The woman scoffed. "It's not about that. It's about being considerate. Some of us know how to act in public." Alicia's face tightened, but she maintained her composure. "I'm just doing my work, ma'am." The woman's voice grew sharper. "Maybe you should do your work somewhere else." The air in the cafe grew tense. Conversations stopped, and heads turned toward the confrontation. Alicia sat frozen, unsure of how to respond without escalating the situation. From his corner table, Johnny Depp had been observing the interaction. His relaxed posture stiffened, and he set down his coffee cup. Removing his sunglasses, he rose from his seat, his expression calm but purposeful. He approached the two women, his presence immediately commanding attention. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low but firm. "Is there a problem here?" The woman turned, her eyes widening slightly as she recognized him. "No problem," she said quickly, her tone shifting to one of forced politeness. Johnny's gaze remained steady. "Doesn't look that way to me," he said. "It looks like you're bothering someone who's just trying to work." The woman's facade cracked. "I wasn't bothering anyone, I was just interrupting her, making her uncomfortable," Johnny cut in, his voice calm but unyielding. "Why?" The woman floundered for a moment, her confidence faltering under Johnny's unwavering stare. "I didn't mean anything by it," she said finally. "I just thought—" "You thought you could speak to her that way because you felt like it," Johnny interrupted again. "But here's the thing. She's not the one with the problem. You are. The room was silent. Alicia looked up at Johnny, her eyes wide with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. The woman straightened, attempting to salvage her dignity. "Well, I don't have to stay here and be insulted," she snapped. "No one's asking you to stay," Johnny said simply, stepping aside to gesture toward the door. "In fact, I think we'd all prefer it if you didn't." The woman's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. She grabbed her bag and stormed out of the cafe, the sound of the door slamming behind her breaking the heavy silence. Johnny turned back to Alicia, his expression softening. "You okay?" he asked. Alicia nodded, her voice steady but touched with emotion. "Yes, thank you." Johnny smiled faintly. No one deserves to be treated like that. He pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. "Mind if I sit for a minute?" Alicia shook her head, a small smile playing at her lips. "Not at all." As the tension in the cafe dissipated, the conversation slowly resumed. Johnny and Alicia exchanged a few words, and he complimented her on how composed she had stayed during the confrontation. "Takes strength to stay calm when someone's coming at you like that," he said. "You handled it better than most." Alicia chuckled softly. "I guess you get used to it." "You shouldn't have to," Johnny replied, his tone serious. The moment didn't end there. A bystander who had witnessed the exchange recorded part of the incident and posted it online. By the next day, the video had gone viral. The clip showed Johnny Depp calmly but firmly standing up for Alicia, and it struck a chord with viewers around the world. The headlines followed. Johnny Depp confronts racist behavior in cafe. Depp's quiet heroism inspires millions. The comments poured in, praising Johnny for using his platform to stand up against injustice, even in everyday situations. For Alicia, the encounter became a story she would tell for years. A moment when a stranger had stepped in to remind her that she was valued and deserving of respect. And for Johnny, it was another example of his belief in doing what's right, regardless of who was watching. Because sometimes, the simplest acts, a calm confrontation, a few kind words, can ripple outward, reminding everyone of the power of standing up for what's right. The airplane cabin hummed with the usual pre-flight bustle. Passengers stowed luggage in overhead bins, adjusted seats, and settled in for the journey ahead. The air was filled with a mix of polite conversation, the occasional laugh, and the soft beeps of flight attendants preparing for takeoff. Among the crowd was Johnny Depp, seated discreetly in first class. Dressed in his signature scarf, glasses, and a fedora, Johnny was hardly recognizable to most. Johnny was a frequent traveler, but he preferred to keep his flights low-key. He had mastered the art of blending in, avoiding attention as much as possible. His seat, tucked away near the front of the cabin, offered him a clear view of the other passengers boarding. He observed quietly, a habit of his, as people filed down the aisle. A few rows behind him in the economy cabin, a middle-aged white woman with a sharp expression settled into her seat. She exuded an air of entitlement, her movements brisk and annoyed as she adjusted her bag under the seat in front of her. Across the aisle sat a black man in his late 30s, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and slacks. His calm demeanor and polite smile contrasted starkly with the woman's impatient glances in his direction. The man, whose name was Marcus, had been one of the last to board the plane. Despite his professional appearance, the woman had cast a judgmental eye on him the moment he entered the cabin. Now, as he politely asked a flight attendant for assistance with his carry-on, her disapproving glare became even more pronounced. As the plane prepared for takeoff, the woman's disdain turned vocal. She leaned across the aisle, her tone sharp. "Excuse me," she said loudly. "Do you mind keeping it down? Some of us are trying to relax before the flight." Marcus blinked, startled. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I wasn't trying to be loud." The woman rolled her eyes, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Well, maybe next time you can board earlier so you're not holding everyone up." Marcus smiled politely, unwilling to escalate the situation. "I'll keep that in mind." But the woman wasn't finished. As the flight attendant handed Marcus his bag, the woman muttered under her breath, though loud enough for those nearby to hear, "Some people don't know how to act in public." Several passengers glanced her way, their faces reflecting varying degrees of shock and discomfort. Marcus, still composed, chose to ignore the comment and settled into his seat. But Johnny Depp, seated just ahead in first class, had overheard everything. Johnny shifted in his seat, his expression darkening. He was no stranger to witnessing unfair treatment, and the woman's behavior struck a nerve. He glanced back subtly, observing the scene unfold. Marcus's quiet dignity in the face of such blatant disrespect impressed him, but it also fueled his resolve to step in if necessary. As the plane taxied down the runway and ascended into the sky, the tension in the economy cabin simmered. The woman continued to shoot irritated glances at Marcus, muttering comments that grew increasingly cutting. "You'd think people would learn how to dress properly for flights," she said loudly at one point, her eyes flicking toward Marcus's polished shoes and neatly pressed shirt. "Some of us are trying to maintain a certain standard." This time Marcus met her gaze, his voice steady but firm. "Ma'am, I don't think my presence here is bothering you as much as you're pretending it is." The woman scoffed, turning away in a huff. Typical. By now, the murmurs among passengers had reached Johnny's ears. He had remained patient, hoping the woman would relent on her own, but her relentless comments pushed him to action. Removing his glasses and scarf, Johnny stood, his presence commanding as he turned toward the economy cabin. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but sharp enough to cut through the cabin's noise. The woman looked up, startled by the interruption. Her eyes widened as she registered who was speaking to her. "Oh," she stammered. You're Johnny Depp." Johnny offered a faint smile, his tone unyielding. "Yes, and I couldn't help but overhear the way you've been speaking to this gentleman." The woman's confidence faltered. "I wasn't trying to be rude," she said quickly. "You weren't trying to be rude," Johnny interrupted, his voice calm but loaded with meaning. "Because it sounded a lot like you were going out of your way to make him uncomfortable." Marcus looked up, his surprise evident. "Mr. Depp, it's fine. I'm used to—" "No," Johnny said firmly, turning to Marcus. "It's not fine. You shouldn't have to get used to being treated like this." The woman's face flushed as Johnny continued. "This man has done nothing but mind his own business, and yet you've decided to single him out. Why is that?" The woman began, but Johnny cut her off. "No, let me guess," he said, his tone sharp. "It's because you think you can. Because you assume your seat, your status, or whatever else gives you the right to treat someone like they're beneath you. Well, let me tell you something, it doesn't." The cabin fell silent. Passengers leaned forward in their seats, watching the scene unfold with rapt attention. Some nodded in agreement, while others exchanged glances of admiration for Johnny's words. The woman sank lower in her seat, her earlier arrogance replaced by visible discomfort. "I didn't mean anything by it," she muttered, her voice barely audible. Johnny tilted his head, his expression softening slightly. "You may not have meant to say anything by it, but your words have meaning. They have impact, and maybe next time, you'll think twice before speaking." He turned to Marcus, offering a genuine smile. "Sir, you've shown more patience and class than most people would in your situation. I just wanted to say that I see it, and I respect it." Marcus nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Thank you," he said quietly. Johnny returned to his seat, the tension in the cabin easing as the other passengers murmured their approval. A flight attendant approached Marcus moments later, offering him a complimentary upgrade to first class for the remainder of the flight. "No thank you," Marcus said, shaking his head. "I'm fine right here." Johnny overheard and chuckled softly. "A man of principle," he muttered, smiling to himself. By the time the plane landed, the story had already started spreading. Several passengers had recorded parts of the incident, sharing clips online. Within hours, the videos went viral, with millions praising Johnny for standing up against prejudice. Headlines read, "Johnny Depp shuts down racist passenger mid-flight. Depp's bold move inspires passengers worldwide." For Marcus, the experience was a reminder of his own strength and the importance of allies who were willing to speak up. And for Johnny, it was another opportunity to use his voice to make a difference, however small. As Marcus left the plane, Johnny caught his eye one last time. "Take care of yourself, man," he said warmly. "You too," Marcus replied, his gratitude clear. Because sometimes the smallest acts of courage, whether sitting quietly in dignity or speaking out against injustice, can ripple outward, inspiring change in ways no one could have predicted. The city glittered under the evening lights, skyscrapers casting long shadows over the bustling streets below. In one of the wealthiest neighborhoods, a luxury restaurant stood out, a towering establishment with sleek black doors and golden accents, its name glowing in elegant cursive above the entrance. The restaurant was known not only for its exquisite cuisine, but also for its exclusivity. Patrons dressed in designer suits and gowns lined up outside, waiting to be ushered in by sharply dressed hosts. A sense of prestige hung in the air, separating the haves from the have-nots. Among the evening crowd, a black SUV pulled up to the valet. The door opened, and out stepped Shaquille O'Neal, known to the world as Big Shaq. His towering frame and unmistakable presence immediately turned heads. Dressed in a tailored suit, Shaq exuded confidence and charisma, smiling warmly as he greeted the valet with a friendly nod. Shaq was there to meet a close friend for dinner, a rare evening off from his packed schedule. Despite his fame and fortune, he had always prided himself on staying humble and approachable. As he approached the entrance, Shaq noticed the host standing near the velvet rope. The man, middle-aged and wearing a crisp uniform, glanced at Shaq and stiffened slightly, his expression unreadable. Shaq reached the host's podium and smiled. "Good evening," he said in his deep, familiar voice. "I've got a reservation under O'Neal." The host hesitated, his eyes flickering over Shaq's towering frame and dark complexion. He flipped through the reservation book with deliberate slowness, his brows furrowed. The host muttered. "I don't see an O'Neal here." Shaq raised an eyebrow. "It should be there. I called earlier today to confirm." The host gave a tight-lipped smile, his tone edging into condescension. "Perhaps you're mistaken. This is an exclusive establishment, sir." Shaq's expression remained calm, though his eyes sharpened. "I'm not mistaken. Can you check again?" The host sighed, flipping through the pages once more before looking up. "I'm sorry, but we don't have a reservation under that name, and unfortunately, we're fully booked tonight." A few patrons nearby watched the interaction, some whispering among themselves. Shaq noticed the subtle glances, the shift in energy. He'd been in situations like this before and knew exactly what was happening. "Fully booked?" Shaq repeated, his voice steady. "Then why did I just see two people walk in without a reservation?" The host's smile faltered, but he quickly recovered. "Those are longtime patrons," he replied smoothly. "We make exceptions for certain clientele." Shaq's jaw tightened. "And what kind of clientele is that?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. The host didn't answer directly. Instead, he gestured toward the exit. "I'm sorry, sir, but I'll have to ask you to step aside. You're holding up the line." The tension in the air was palpable. Shaq's towering presence and unwavering stare made the host visibly uncomfortable, but he held his ground. Before Shaq could respond, a voice from behind him cut through the crowd. "Is there a problem here?" Everyone turned to see a well-dressed man stepping forward. It was James Williams, a prominent businessman and close friend of Shaq's. James was already inside the restaurant when he noticed the commotion at the entrance and came to investigate. James walked up to Shaq, shaking his hand firmly. "Good to see you, my man. I was wondering what was taking you so long." He turned to the host, his tone icy. "Why hasn't he been let in?" The host stammered, his composure cracking under the weight of the situation. There seems to be an issue with the reservation." "There's no issue," James interrupted. "I made the reservation under my name, Williams. He's my guest." The host paled, flipping through the book again with shaky hands. "Oh, yes, here it is. My apologies, Mr. Williams. Right this way." James didn't move. Instead, he crossed his arms, his gaze hard. "So, it's fine now that you know he's with me? What would have happened if I hadn't shown up?" The host opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. Shaq, still calm but visibly frustrated, spoke up. "You can't treat people like this, man. It's not about my name or who I'm with. Everyone deserves respect." By now, the other patrons were fully engaged, their conversations hushed as they watched the scene unfold. Some pulled out their phones, recording the interaction. "I've been coming here for years," James said coldly. "But after tonight, I'm done. If this is how you treat people, I want no part of it." James looked at Shaq and gestured toward the exit. "Let's go somewhere else. Somewhere that actually deserves our business." Shaq nodded, turning to leave. As they walked away, a ripple of applause broke out among the bystanders, a few shouting words of support. By the next morning, the story had gone viral. Videos of the incident flooded social media, sparking outrage and conversations about racism and discrimination. Headlines read, "Shaquille O'Neal denied entry to luxury restaurant. Here's what happened next." Big Shaq's calm dignity shines amid shocking incident. The restaurant issued a public apology, claiming the incident was a misunderstanding. But the damage had already been done. Shaq, ever the gentleman, addressed the situation during an interview. "I've dealt with moments like this my whole life," he said. "But it's not about me. It's about the bigger issue, how we treat each other as human beings. Everyone deserves respect, no matter who they are." The incident became a turning point for the restaurant, which faced calls for boycotts and had to implement mandatory sensitivity training for its staff. Meanwhile, Shaq continued to use his platform to advocate for kindness and equality. For those who witnessed it firsthand, the night was a reminder of the importance of standing up against injustice, even in the smallest moments. And for Shaq, it was another opportunity to show the world that dignity and grace could triumph over prejudice. It was a quiet evening at a local KFC when Eminem, dressed casually in a hoodie and jeans, walked in to grab a quick meal. The staff and customers barely recognized him as he approached the counter. But just as he placed his order, something caught his attention. A whisper behind him from two young boys standing in line. What Eminem did next shocked everyone in the restaurant and turned an ordinary night into an unforgettable story. Odaich, the KFC wasn't particularly busy, but the warm smell of fried chicken filled the air, drawing in locals for dinner. Among the patrons were two young brothers, Marcus, 10, and Jamal, 12, who had walked to the restaurant with a few dollars they had earned helping neighbors rake leaves. Meanwhile, a familiar yet unexpected figure entered the restaurant. Eminem, who was known for staying grounded and often spending time in his hometown, had stopped by to grab a meal after a long day at the studio. Wearing a white hoodie pulled low over his face and a baseball cap, he blended in easily with the crowd, unnoticed by most. Marcus and Jamal, however, immediately recognized him. Standing a few feet behind him in line, the boys began whispering excitedly. "That's Eminem," Marcus said, his eyes wide. "No way," Jamal replied, but his tone betrayed his disbelief. "What's he doing here?" Their awe was palpable, but the brothers hesitated to approach him. After all, this was one of the biggest stars in the world. What could they possibly say to him? As Eminem placed his order, he couldn't help but overhear the hushed voices behind him. "Do you think he'll talk to us?" Marcus whispered. "No way," Jamal replied. "He's too famous for kids like us." The comment made Eminem pause. Turning his head slightly, he glanced at the boys, their wide eyes filled with both excitement and hesitation. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth as he finished paying for his meal. Instead of walking away, he stepped to the side, waiting for the brothers to order. When the cashier called the boys to the counter, they fumbled with their crumpled bills, nervously ordering a small meal to share. Eminem watched quietly before stepping forward. "Hey," he said, his voice calm and casual. The boys froze, looking up at him in shock. "You guys hungry?" he asked, his tone kind but direct. Marcus and Jamal nodded, still too stunned to speak. Eminem motioned to the cashier. "Put their order on my tab, and give them whatever they want. Extra fries, drinks, desserts, hook them up." The boys' faces lit up as they realized what was happening. "You don't have to do that," Jamal said shyly, but Eminem shook his head. "It's no big deal," he replied. "You guys remind me of myself when I was your age." As they waited for their food, Eminem sat down at a nearby table and invited the boys to join him, Still starstruck, Marcus and Jamal hesitated before sliding into the booth. "So, what's your favorite song?" Eminem asked, breaking the ice. The boys glanced at each other before blurting out, almost in unison, "Lose Yourself." Eminem chuckled. "Good choice," he said. "That's a classic." Over the next few minutes, the conversation flowed easily. The boys shared how they were saving up to buy new shoes for school, and how much their mom loved Eminem's music. "She always says your songs are about real life," Marcus said. "Like the hard stuff people go through." Eminem nodded thoughtfully. "That's because they are," he said. "Life isn't always easy, but you've got to keep pushing. You've got to believe in yourself, no matter what." As their food arrived, Eminem stood up and reached into his pocket, pulling out a few $100 bills. He handed them to Marcus and Jamal, who stared at the money in disbelief. "Use this to help your mom," he said. "Get those shoes you were talking about. And maybe something extra for her too." The boys were speechless. "Are you serious?" Jamal finally managed to ask. Eminem smiled. "Yeah, I'm serious. But remember, it's not about the money. It's about what you do with it. Take care of each other and take care of your mom. She sounds like an amazing lady." By now, other patrons in the restaurant had started to notice the interaction. Some began snapping photos, but Eminem didn't seem to care. His focus remained on the boys. Before leaving, he signed their KFC boxes with a quick message: "Stay strong and keep hustling. Eminem." As he walked out of the restaurant, the entire room erupted into applause. Marcus and Jamal sat in stunned silence, clutching their autographed boxes and the money he had given them. The boys ran home to tell their mom what had happened, their excitement spilling over as they recounted every detail. Their mother, overwhelmed with gratitude, couldn't believe the story. "He didn't just give you money," she said. "He gave you a lesson in kindness and hard work. That's something you'll carry forever." Word of the encounter spread quickly, with locals sharing the story on social media. Fans praised Eminem for his humility and generosity, calling him a true role model. "This is why I've always respected him," one commenter wrote. "He hasn't forgotten where he came from." For Marcus and Jamal, the experience became a defining moment. Inspired by Eminem's words, they worked even harder in school and began saving for their future. Years later, they would reflect on that night as a turning point, a reminder that even small acts of kindness can make a big difference. Eminem's unexpected act of kindness shows us that even the smallest interactions can leave a lasting impact. Whether it's buying someone a meal or sharing a few encouraging words, we all have the power to make a difference. What part of this story touched you the most? Have you ever experienced a moment of kindness that changed your life? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's all be inspired to pay it forward. LeBron James is known for his incredible talent on the basketball court, but what he did for a struggling waitress one afternoon in a Cleveland diner proved that his heart is just as big as his game. When LeBron noticed her quietly holding back tears while serving customers, he decided to step in. And what happened next left everyone in the restaurant stunned. It was a busy weekday afternoon at a small diner near downtown Cleveland. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling bacon filled the air as regulars chatted over their meals. Among the bustling crowd was LeBron James, who had stopped by with a few friends after a morning workout. Dressed casually in a hoodie and sweatpants, he hoped to enjoy a low-key lunch at one of his favorite local spots. The diner's staff was doing their best to keep up with the lunch rush, but it was clear that one waitress in particular was struggling. Her name was Amanda, a single mother of two who had been working double shifts to make ends meet. Despite her exhaustion, she managed to greet each table with a smile, though her eyes betrayed her weariness. As Amanda brought LeBron's table their drinks, she accidentally spilled a glass of water. Her face flushed with embarrassment as she scrambled to apologize and clean up the mess. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice shaky. But instead of being annoyed, LeBron offered her a kind smile. "It's just water," he said reassuringly. "Don't worry about it." As the meal went on, LeBron couldn't help but notice Amanda wiping her eyes discreetly as she worked. She moved quickly from table to table, her energy clearly drained. Yet she continued to treat every customer with kindness. Something about her demeanor struck a chord with LeBron, who remembered his own mother's struggles to support him growing up. When Amanda returned to take their order, LeBron gently asked, "Are you okay? You seem like you've got a lot on your plate." Caught off guard, Amanda hesitated before admitting, "It's just been a tough day, but I'll be fine. Thank you for asking." She quickly changed the subject, not wanting to burden anyone with her problems. But LeBron wasn't convinced. As she walked away, LeBron quietly asked the diner's manager about Amanda. He learned that she had been working overtime to cover unexpected medical expenses for her son, who had recently been hospitalized. The manager spoke highly of Amanda, calling her one of the hardest working and most selfless people on the team. LeBron sat back, deep in thought. He knew he had the ability to help, and he wasn't about to let the opportunity pass. Before leaving the diner, LeBron called Amanda over to thank her for her excellent service. "You've been amazing today," he said, "and I know it hasn't been easy." Amanda smiled politely, still not realizing what was about to happen. LeBron handed her a folded napkin and said, "This is for you. Don't open it until after your shift." Amanda, confused but grateful, thanked him and tucked the napkin into her apron pocket. What Amanda didn't know was that inside the napkin was a check for $10,000, along with a handwritten note that read, "Thank you for your hard work and kindness. Take care of yourself and your family. LeBron James." Before leaving, LeBron quietly paid for every customer's meal in the diner and left an additional tip for the entire staff, ensuring that everyone felt appreciated. When Amanda finally finished her shift and opened the napkin, she was overwhelmed by what she saw. Tears streamed down her face as she read the note and realized the life-changing amount of money that had been gifted to her. Her co-workers gathered around, stunned by LeBron's generosity. "I couldn't believe it," Amanda later said in an interview. "He didn't just leave a tip, he changed my life. I'll never forget his kindness." News of the encounter quickly spread after a customer who had witnessed the interaction shared the story on social media. The post went viral, with thousands of people praising LeBron for his humility and generosity. LeBron, however, remained characteristically humble when asked about it during a press conference. "It's not about me," he said. "It's about recognizing people who work hard and deserve a little extra support. Amanda reminded me of my mom, and I just wanted to pay it forward." Amanda used the money to pay off her son's medical bills and take a much-needed break to spend time with her family. "For the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe," she said. Inspired by LeBron's act of kindness, she also started volunteering at a local charity, determined to help others the way she had been helped. The story also inspired others to pay it forward. Customers who frequented the diner began leaving larger tips, and a local business owner donated new equipment to the restaurant to support the hard-working staff. LeBron's simple act of kindness created a ripple effect that touched countless lives, proving that even the smallest gestures can have a profound impact. LeBron James's unexpected generosity reminds us of the power of compassion and the importance of lifting each other up. What part of this story inspired you the most? Have you ever experienced or witnessed an act of kindness that changed someone's life?